Hello and thank you for watching. I'm Jennifer Bowman with Olympia Piano, and this video is a tutorial for switching from a 1 chord or a tonic chord to a 5 chord or a dominant chord 4 different ways on the piano. By the end of this video, you might be comfortable playing something like this. This video is going to take place in the key of C major and will be a little bit more in-depth, so it's going to be a longer video. However, I will follow up this video with a short version of this exercise in all 12 major keys. Before we start in with the patterns, if you are familiar with half steps and whole steps, major scale, what a tonic and dominant is, and chord inversions, then look in the description below for the timestamps and just skip directly to the 4 different 1 to 5 patterns. If you are not familiar with the things I just mentioned, let's just go over them quickly. So the first thing we're going to review is half steps and whole steps on the piano. They're really easy to see on the piano keyboard. A half step is the very next key. That's a half step. It can be white to white, white to black, or black to white. A whole step is made up of 2 half steps. 1, 2. I like to say with my students, skip 1 key or 1 key in the middle. And whole steps can be white to white. They can be black to black. They can be white to black, or they can be black to white. Half steps and whole steps are important for this exercise because when we switch from the 1 chord to the 5 chord, 2 of your fingers are going to move. One is going to move a whole step, the other is going to move a half step, and the other finger will stay where it is. So next we're going to review the notes of a major scale and see where the 1 and 5 chords come from. If you look up above, you'll see the major scale with the whole steps and half steps noted, W for whole and H for half. So the formula for a major scale starting on any of these keys is whole step, whole, then half, then 3 whole steps, whole, half. So the half steps occur between mi and fa and ti and do. In the scale, each syllable has a number, and generally these numbers are written with Roman numerals. So if you take a look at the scale again, I've put the Roman numerals above the first note of the scale, do, and so, the 5th note of the scale. 1 is known as the tonic, 5 is known as the dominant. Just a side note, when you're dealing with a major harmony, it's going to be uppercase Roman numeral, minor will be lowercase. Because this video is focusing on a major key, they're going to be both uppercase for the tonic and the dominant. In a major key, we create the harmonies of that key using the notes of the scale. So we're going to just use these notes to create our harmonies. And our basic harmonies are going to consist of 3 different notes. So to create our 1 chord or tonic chord, we're going to use the first note of the scale, which in this video is C. And to create the chord, we just take every other note in the scale. So the 1 chord is going to be do and mi or E and so or G. That is our 1 chord, do, mi, so, C, E, G. By the way, when you play the chord in this position, it's called root position because the root, the number of the scale, do, C in this case, is the bottom note. So this is a root position chord. Then we can create the dominant harmony the exact same way, except we're going to start on so, which is the 5th note or the dominant note. So, skip 1, T, re, G, B, D. And that's our dominant chord. I want to mention here, sometimes with a dominant chord, you might hear about what's called a dominant 7 chord. And what that is you are going to just add 1 more, 3rd on top here. You're going to add this fa or F, creates a little bit stronger harmony. We're not going to do the 5-7 chord in this video, but I wanted you to be aware of how it's created. So we start on so, ti, re, fa. So now we have the chord members of a 1 chord, do, mi, so, C, E, G, and the chord members of a 5 chord, so, ti, re, G, B, D. that leads me to the third thing I want to discuss before showing you the 4 ways you can play the 1 and 5 chord, and that is chord inversions. I have a much longer video about this, which is listed in the description below. But in short, inversions are different ways you can mix up the chord notes. We actually just went over the first version of the chord, the root position chord. This is the one where you find out what are the notes in the harmony. So we've got do, mi, so. For this version of the C chord, the fingering can either be 1, 3, 5, or 1, 2, 4, depending on the context, and you can use that fingering for either hand. 1, 3, 5, or 1, 2, 4 for root position. So now that we have our chord ingredients, if you look at that scale again, we're going to keep these 3 syllables, but instead of starting on do, we're going to have mi be the bottom note. So mi or E, then so, G, and do. So this chord is called first inversion. It's going to feel a little bit more stretched out. Look carefully on the scale and make sure that you actually have 2 notes in between the so and the do. Sometimes when people do inversions, they'll just go up in the same position, but those aren't the same notes. So make sure you still have C, E, and G, E, G, C, mi, so, do. Fingering for this is going to be 1, 2, 5 for the right hand. And if you play this with the left hand, it's going to be 5, 3, 1, generally. Finally, we have one more option, and this is called second inversions. Again, we're going to use the same syllables or notes instead. This time we're going to start on so or G. So looking at the scale, we'll have so. Our next chord member is do, 2 notes in between there, and then mi on the top, G, C, E. Fingering for this inversion, second inversion in the right hand, generally is going to be 1, 3, 5, and in the left hand it's generally going to be 5, 2, 1. So our root position we have, and then we can do the exact same thing for the dominant chord. Do, re, mi, fa, so. Here's our dominant. So we have so, ti, re, G, B, D, root position. Now let's put that so on the top. T, re, so, B, D, G, first inversion. Now let's put the T on the top. Re, so, T, D, G, B. Those are our 3 inversions for the G chord. So that is all the basic information you need to now do the exercises between the 1 and the 5 chord. So I want to mention before we go over the changes, because we're in the key of C, you don't have to worry about any black keys, but I really want you to pay attention to which switches are half steps and which ones are whole steps, because other keys will have black keys in them, and you want to be really secure in your changes, which one is a half step and which is a whole step. The first way you can play the 1 and 5 chord is both in root position, like this. Your hand has to move up, but it's an easy move because your thumb is just going to go where your pinky was, and you can clearly hear the 1, 5, 1 harmonic movement. So what I want you to notice from this position is that both chords share so or G. So keep that in mind as we look at version 2. So now let's take a look at version 2. If we start in root position for the 1 chord, we want to find the 5 chord that's in the closest position to this, the least amount of moving. So because we know that both the 1 and 5 chord have this so or G, what we're going to use is the G chord that has the G on the top. So root position, G's on the bottom. First inversion, G's on the top. So we're going to move to that G position. When we start with root position like this, you can see on the diagram above that the bottom note, do or C, is going to move down a half step, so that your thumb's going to move down a half step to T or B. And then this middle note here, mi, is going to move down a whole step to re. And then we're going to keep that G or so where it is. As far as the fingering goes, if you're playing this progression with your right hand, start with 1, 3, 5 for the 1 chord. Then when you move, you're just going to play finger 2 where it is and scoot your thumb down a half step. And and scoot your thumb back up a half step. Fingering for the left hand can be done two different ways. Either you can start with 4-2-1 for the one chord, and then play the 5 chord with 1-3-5 right where it is, and 1-2-4. Or you can do 1-3-5 for both the 1 chord and the 5 chord, just scooting your 3rd and 5th fingers down. Just remember, in the key of C, it's easy. We don't have to think about black keys, but if we're in a different key, then sometimes that half step is going to be a black key. So next, we're going to start with the right hand in first inversion. So mi, so, do, E, G, C. And I want you to take notice how the name of the chord is up here. It's the top note this time, because this is the one that's going to be moving down a half step, the one that's the name, do or C. So for this change, we're going to be keeping the middle note this time. See, our so or G's in the middle, and we're moving the outside notes. So the top, as I mentioned before, is going to move down a half step. And the bottom is going to move down a whole step. The fingering for this one can be done two different ways in the right hand. You can either start with 1-2-5 and then play 4 where it is and scoot the thumb down a whole step. Or with the right hand, you can start with 1-2-5 and then scoot the whole hand down, but then finger 3 is going to play G. So it would look like this: 1-2-5, 1-3-5, 1-2-5. So you just want to make sure when you scoot down, you actually switch to the 3rd finger and don't play finger 2 when you scoot. So both of those work really well. As far as the fingering for the left hand, it's basically the reverse of what the right hand just did. You can either start with 4-2-1, keep the 2 on the G, scoot the thumb down a half step, and then play the pinky for the 5 chord. Or, like the right hand did, you can start with 1-3-5, and when you scoot down, make sure that 2 goes to the G. And then finally, the last version of this chord progression is going to start with the right hand in second inversion. That is so, do, mi, in this key, G, C, E. Again, we're going to keep so or G in this place and move the other notes. So now the name of our chord, do or C, is in the middle. So that's the one that's going to move down a half step. And then our mi or E is on the top, and that's going to move down a whole step. So right hand fingering can be done two ways. You can either start with 1-3-5 and scoot both the 3 and the 5 down, just keeping track of which finger's scooting a half step and which finger's scooting a whole step. So you could do it like this. Middle finger's the half step, top finger's the whole step. Again, in the key of C, it's easy because we don't have to deal with black keys. Or you can do 1-3-5, 1-2-4, 1-3-5. For the version of this in the left hand's going to start with 5-2-1, keep the 5 in position, and then when you scoot down, the thumb's going to scoot down a whole step, and you're going to play finger 3 instead. So now let's just do a quick review of all 4 of those versions of this 1-5-1 change. We can either hop up, we can start in root position and then just switch the bottom 2 notes. We can start in first inversion, switch the outsides. We can start in second inversion and switch the top 2 notes. So once you have all of these chords really secure, that's where it becomes really fun. I'm going to give you 4 different patterns you can play around with once you have these fingerings and these changes secure. And I'll show you the patterns and what you can do, both if the pattern is in the right hand or if it's in the left hand. So pattern 1. If you look above, you'll see I just started in root position with the right hand and I used version 2 of our switches. Left hand, I'm just going to play the root and the 5th, and you can just play block chords like this. Switch to 5, and then back to 1. You might be singing over this or have another instrument over this. So when I do the block chords with the left hand, I'm going to play a little melody in the right hand. Pattern 2, you can block 2 notes of the chord and then play 1 single note alternating back and forth. This sounds really great. I love this one. I'm going to start again with the right hand in root position, switching to this version of the G chord. And one other way you can mix it up is instead of playing single notes in the left hand, you can play octaves. That's when you feel really confident. So here's pattern 2, back and forth, switch to 5, and then back to 1. Now we can do that same sort of thing with the left hand. This time I'm going to demonstrate it starting in first inversion. So I'm actually going to, let's see here. Because my hands are larger, I'm going to do this with 4, 2, 1. And again, the right hand's going to play a little melody. So we start with our 1 chord, 5, 1. Pattern 3. We're going to take the chords and we're going to pass through them all one note at a time. I'm going to demonstrate this one with right hand starting in first inversion, switching like this. A left hand again is just going to play single notes. So we're going to pass through the notes up and down. So the middle note is going to get played twice because it will get played on the way up and played on the way down. 1 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. When you play version 3 with the left hand, it's extremely common in classical music. It even has a special name. It's called Alberti bass because a composer named Domenico Alberti used this type of pattern, but you will hear this in Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, Schubert. A lot of the great classical composers use this technique. So I'm going to demonstrate here with the left hand starting in root position and then scooting down. And the right hand's going to play a little melody with it. Here we go, pattern 3. Okay, here's another way you can play these chord changes. This is a really beautiful and popular one. Instead of using 2 eighth notes, we're going to use 3 eighth notes per beat. It's called a triplet, and then each note just gets played 1 time. And I'm going to demonstrate this in the right hand starting in second inversion. Simple left hand harmony. And I'm going to demonstrate it both starting on the bottom note and starting on the top note. So this is a way you can make a musical choice as to what might fit what you're trying to do. And then now I'm going to do the opposite, starting on the top, going down. By the way, I'm ending on a C, but you could end on any of those notes of the C chord. When the left hand plays this pattern, it also sounds really awesome and is used in all sorts of music. This triplet pattern, very popular. In this example, I will show the left hand starting in second inversion. So is the bottom note. We're going to change the top 2 notes when we do the change. And again, the right hand is going to play a little melody. So it will sound like this. Choosing to jump down to end on Do or tonic. Now if I do the left hand starting on the top, I'm going to change my melody just a little bit so it sounds a little bit better with this pattern. Or you could even do this, be fancy at the end, crossover. So these are just 4 common examples of patterns you can use to play around with this progression and others. You can get fancy with them by mixing up the rhythm. And I'll have a later video on some of the things you can do with the rhythm to make it more interesting. So be looking for that. The main concept I want you to get from this video, however, is if you keep track of where all the notes of the main chord are, then you can train your muscle memory for the switches of the half step and whole step to the 5 chords. So we know we share the 5, the root or the Do goes down a half step, the Mi goes down a whole step. And that's all you need to know. So if I do it on these black keys, we're going to keep that top note. This is going to go down a half step. This is going to go down a whole step. I do it here in the key of D. Same thing. They all just feel different, but they all move the same. So thank you again for watching this long tutorial for switches between the 1-chord tonic to dominant switches. There will be short versions for all 12 of the major keys. Look for those so you can be positive about how those switches work. I hope that you subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. I also have videos on scales, arpeggios, technique books, and quick piano tips. I love to hear from you. Please write to me in the comments. Let me know what you're working on and if there are videos you would like to see. As always, thank you for watching.